Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We just checked in with legislative leadership from both parties, but how do the state's businesses feel after this session? With me now to discuss is CBIA's president and CEO Chris DiPentima. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be on with you.
So really quickly, before we get into some of the reaction and response, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about what CBIA is and who you are.
Yeah, CBIA, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, is the state largest business organization. We're celebrating our 210th year this year.
Wow.
Yeah, founded in 1815. And we represent thousands of businesses across the state of Connecticut, large, small, every industry sector. And obviously we spend most of our time up at the Capitol advocating for the business community during this busy session season.
Absolutely, and this was a busy one. It was a budget year, as we see every other session. So walk me through a reaction from you all to the state budget first, before we get into maybe some specific proposals. But how are you feeling with this two-year budget that just got across the finish line Tuesday?
There's some good investments in the budget. Major concerns, though, from the business community is the way we went about finding those investments, working around the guardrails, specifically the spending cap, which the business community has been advocating to keep in place and honor for several years now, because we've seen the predictability, stability, and certainty those caps have given us, the budget surpluses over the last 6 years, paying down our pension liabilities, and significant investments in Connecticut. I mean, just 2 short years ago, we were celebrating that budget because we not only paid down our pensions, we honored the guardrails, and we had the largest tax income cut in Connecticut's history. 2 years later, we've increased the budget $5 billion, a $2.6 billion spending increase, and we really worked around the guardrails, which causes uncertainty for future budget cycles.
And I know that 2023 budget was definitely a celebrated one, and we've been talking about the guardrails for the past 3 years now, as we've kind of seen this creeping trend of lawmakers seeking some reforms and some adjustments when we look at sort of the increasing need from various groups. Obviously, we know we're never going to make everybody happy with the state budget, but there have been a lot more people seeking kind of a smaller and smaller sections of the pie. Tell me a little bit more about what you wish you would have seen in there, or some of the different adjustments maybe you wish hadn't have happened with this budget.
Yeah, honoring the spending cap would have been first and foremost, and we've been able to do that for 6 years. And the fact that we had to work around it in so many different ways this year, again, that opens that uncertainty, that unpredictability for the future. We would have really quite honestly preferred that if we were going to make significant investments, grab from the rainy day fund and make those investments. Be honest about the guardrails, keep them in place. They were just extended again during that 2023 budget and are expiring in 27, 28. So what does that mean for the future of the guardrails, that things that have provided us that predictability? The other concerns in the budget is the business tax hikes. There was over $350 million in business tax hikes, primarily affecting some of the larger job creators in the state. And that's a concern as well, because we haven't had business tax hikes in the last 5 years. So guardrail tweaking, business tax hikes, again, what's this mean for the future of Connecticut? But it was great to see the investment in childcare, or the expansion of more affordable, accessible childcare. That's been a big priority for CBIA. Again, I would have preferred the investment be done a different way, but that was a significant investment for Connecticut, and hopefully can especially get more females back into the workplace, because the labor participation rate for women versus men is about 20% lower after the age of 30. So that's hopefully going to be a big investment in Connecticut.
I know that's been a big push for you all, like you said, a big priority, especially I think post-COVID, trying to get people returning to the workforce and give them the supports they need. Outside of the budget, though, any other positives you're seeing in terms of policy, bills passed from this session? Yeah,
we were able to get a first-time homebuyer savings account through, and so while it's not going to make housing lower, the cost of housing, and I know that will continue to be a debate at the Capitol about what policies can drive down or stabilize housing prices, it will make housing more affordable for individuals, especially those individuals looking to buy their first home. They'll be able to put some money away, and we will be the first state to have this first-time homebuyer savings account, which will have an employer match to it as well, and the employer will get a tax credit. So hopefully that builds up some momentum for some individuals. And then in addition, there was some great regulatory reform this session, and that probably is the biggest win for not only the businesses but the residents of Connecticut. Regulatory reform that's going to allow us to move commercial properties much easier in transactions. Estimates are that it will probably grow the economy by about $4 billion, create over 2,000 construction jobs. And there were some other permitting reforms around small businesses too, making it easier for small businesses to navigate environmental environmental regulations. So that's really been something the business community's been looking for, and that was a big win this session.
Yeah, easing those to allow the businesses to grow and have an easier time, absolutely. Before I get back to that a little bit, I do want to talk about the striking workers bill. This was a controversial measure from last session that was kind of like thrown in toward the end. This was a little too vague. This year it definitely had a little bit more construction and hard lines to it, but once again, a lot of controversy. We saw it pass both chambers, spoken with Senator Julie Kushner from the Labor Committee about it, who is a real advocate for it. We saw a lot of people pushing for it, and I think it was top of mind because of this long Pratt & Whitney workers strike we just saw, so it was kind of coinciding with that, and a lot of people were thinking about those workers. The governor had been quiet on it, and then, a week or two ago at the end of the session did say he would veto it. He threatened to veto it last year. It's going to his desk now. He has threatened to veto it. How is CBIA feeling about that proposal?
We've delivered a veto request letter to the governor.
Okay.
Again, we're asking him to veto it again. This year, bill, honestly, is probably more egregious than last year's bill.
Okay.
Last year's bill would have been paid through a budget account, which would have been from the taxpayers. That's not a great way to fund striking workers either. This year's would have been through the unemployment trust fund, which is solely paid for by the business community, by employers. And as the governor said, using his own words, it doesn't send a great message to businesses. And if you're a union organization, you want to see your business growing, you want to see more union jobs created, the striking workers benefit bill would have probably chased businesses out of the state of Connecticut. So we really appreciate the governor standing up for that. And hopefully this is kind of, once and done finally of this bill, because it's the second year in a row that they've attempted it. It was passing in California as well, and Governor Newsom vetoed it out there. Yeah. So we really do appreciate Governor Lamont standing up on that.
And obviously, we heard those comments from him publicly, but have you had any sort of conversations with him? I know you just sent the veto request letter, and then the session just wrapped up. But had you had any conversations with him about vetoing this, since it is on its way to his desk now? Yeah,
he continues to confirm both publicly and privately that he's going to veto the measure. And again, that gives businesses that predictability, that stability and certainty that the measures like this are not going to pass, and that we're going to still have an employer-employee relationship that's balanced in Connecticut.
And with that, in our last couple minutes here, I know there were definitely some negatives coming out of this session, but we are hearing from lawmakers that they're considering going back for a special session. They think they might need it, especially to make some budget adjustments. As you said, you're always up there at the Capitol advocating for the business community. Can you share a little bit of insight about some of your conversations with legislative leadership and other lawmakers overall this session? We just heard in our first segment a nod toward bipartisanship, which we know a lot of our lawmakers do really try to value here in Connecticut. Even still, things can get a little testy during the session. But what did those conversations look like, and is there anything that did give you encouragement after this session?
No, the biggest encouragement in those conversations are still happening. That there is bipartisan discussion happening in Connecticut. There's public-private sector discussion happening in Connecticut. We're a very collaborative state with deep relationships, and I think that conversation is going to continue in the off session, especially around issues like energy. There was incremental improvements in the cost of energy in the budget this year, in the session this year, but the business community was really looking for transformative, and I think the residents of Connecticut want transformative changes to the cost of energy. We're the second highest energy cost state in the country. We need to bring those costs down if we're going to keep businesses here, attract businesses here, but also keep residents here and attract new residents to Connecticut to grow the population, to grow the workforce. So it came a little late in the session, but at least we made some incremental changes that will bring down electric bills for residents. And in the off session, I know they'll continue to work on a more collaborative, hopefully more transformative policies around energy practices. And then, of course, whatever comes our way from D.C. And so that's why we are likely to come back in some type of special session, maybe in September, October, or November, because we got to see what type of federal funding cuts we have there. This is us being fortunate of having such a big rainy day fund that we can maybe protect some programs that are key to growing the economy and our residents if there are federal cuts. But that will be a really challenging discussion, especially given all the spending increases that happened years this year. So it will be important that there's still collaboration around that. And of course, any other things to lower the cost of living in Connecticut. There wasn't much done this session, very little around health insurance and the cost of health insurance for employers and employees. That's something the legislators got to get their arms around because we have fewer and fewer options for carriers in Connecticut, and the increases are just too much on the employer and the employee, to the point where many businesses are starting to stop offering health insurance.
And I know those are some big priorities that we've heard are already at the top of the list for next year. And like you said, watching the possibility of a special session for the budget. We'll continue to be following this. But Chris, thank you so much for checking in with us.
Pleasure to be on.
That's all the time we have here on The Real Story. But if you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the free Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. Have a great morning.